Do you have questions about the tariffs with President Trump's recent executive orders? Volunteer reporter from the Mesquite, Elyssa Quesada, and editor-in-chief of the Mesquite, Johnathan Peña, alongside assistant professor Dr. Vipul Garg, are breaking down how today's policies compared to previous administrations will affect San Antonio as a whole.
We're here with Dr. Vipul Garg, assistant professor of the Department and Marketing at A&M San Antonio. Welcome, Dr. Garg. Thank you for taking the time to speak with me today about tariffs and their impact on the economy. So, understanding tariffs. For those who may not be familiar, could you explain what tariffs are and how they function in international trade?
Perfect. Thank you so much. Happy to be here and part of explaining this as well. Now, before we move on about tariffs, so historically, tariffs were introduced to levy the game. So essentially, if you're importing something, but you want to also save that domestically, like so if you're manufacturing your own cars domestically, but there is a car company, let's say in China, that is making very nice cars as well. So if you want to protect your personal interest of the industries, essentially, you will have a tariff, right? So essentially, to bring that car in your country, you want to make sure that they're not messing up with what you're producing. So let's say Ford is making great cars in the United States, and a company from China like BYD is an electric company. You want to make sure that that company is not going to come here and wipe out the whole industry that you have created in, let's say, 2 decades or 3 decades. So that's how tariffs work functionally. Now, historically in the United States, tariffs were used to get revenue. So if you go back all the way to 1600 and 1700s, there were no income taxes by the government. There were no income taxes, so they still had to get revenue. And for that, they had tariffs. That was the source of income for the government until they started doing income taxes, like in 1700s and 1800s. And that's how tariffs were introduced in US. But if you go back like 1000 BC, they were always there in Roman Empire. All these they always had tariffs going on. So tariffs is really not something new. It's just that because you're hearing that a lot these days, it seems like a new concept. So it has always existed in the past. Now, how you use it has been very different in the history. Some countries have used it to play the level ground together. So like if I'm making car and if I want your car to come here, I obviously want to still give benefit to the car company that is here investing all that money in the United States, not the car company that is bringing your car from outside. So I'll put in some extra money that, hey, if you really want to sell this car, you're happy to pay this duty. And if consumers really want your car, they'll still buy our car. Sounds fine. But when it gets crazy is when you use whole industry as an example that, hey, I think our industry is not doing great. So to do that, we should do tariffs and then impose those tariffs. That's where it starts to hurt consumers a lot, usually. And it has been historically that way in the past.
How do tariffs affect consumers and businesses both in the US and abroad?
It's a very complicated question in general because it also depends on the kind of industry that we are talking about. But easy example, in 2018, when the tariffs were implemented on washing machines, what happened was the prices of dryers also went up. Now you would think that why would that happen? Because companies know that when you buy a washer, you're going to buy a dryer as well, right? So that will still lead in increased cost. Now, that is what is capitalism that we have in the United States because I mean companies want to make more money. So even though you increase the price of just let's say washer, it also impacted the price of dryer at the same time. Another example was agriculture. So we export a lot of agriculture outside of the United States. When we put tariffs, we had retaliatory tariffs on our agriculture as well. That dropped the exports of agriculture at the same time, and that resulted in loss agriculture industry. So that's how it becomes complicated really quick when you talk about industries because let's say if you're pretty much exporting something from your country and you put tariffs on something else, they're going to put tariffs back on what you are exporting or getting in as well, and it's going to hurt you as well. Another perfect example is Venezuela that we are hearing in the news right now. If you impose 25% tariffs, if somebody buys oil from Venezuela, same problem. We are the third biggest customer of Venezuela. So does that mean that we are going to pay tariffs on ourselves as well to buy oil from Venezuela? So it's always interesting to see how tariffs can, benefit and also hurt you at the same time. But usually, my understanding is tariffs are always put there to help your industry grow, right? So let's say if you're saying that manufacturing is a challenge in the United States, we want to make more manufacturing jobs. But now the challenge is, from my experience that I've seen, are there people who are interested in doing manufacturing jobs? Is the bigger question. So let's say there are no manufacturing jobs, but I bring in 100,000 manufacturing jobs today. Are people going to work in those 100,000 manufacturing jobs? Is the bigger question, right? Which is a question that is usually overlooked by most people, right? You can bring in the jobs, but do we have the workers to actually do those jobs as well at the same time? Now you're trying to benefit the country, right? Because you're trying to bring more jobs, but do we have the people who really want to do those jobs? Is also mismatched problem essentially in this case.
Also with the characteristics and
Yeah.
the skill
So
set for it too.
I work on drone industry. So the biggest challenge in drone industry is the same. When we spoke to companies, the reason they don't want to produce something here is for the same reason they can't find people to do that, which is why they're forced to go to other countries like China, Vietnam, India, because nobody is willing to do that work here. Like if you're not finding a supplier who is good, you will have to go somewhere else to do that, which is a natural problem. Which is why I realized that, hey, bigger question is, if I do bring in the jobs, does it even, do I have people to actually do those jobs? And second, have we put in the money to train those people to do those jobs as well, right? Have we invested money in skilled workforce to actually do those manufacturing jobs? I don't think so in the last few years. So that's another part of this equation that gets lost a lot of times. It's great to bring the jobs back, but do we have the people who really want to do those jobs or not at the same time, right? So that's something I see always.
If I could go a little bit more specific, how are these tariffs affecting consumers?
So simply think it this way. If you buy a car, right? Most of those cars are actually manufactured in Mexico. 75% of the cars that we have are coming from Mexico. Now, if you have tariffs implemented on Mexico, those cars are going to get more expensive, right? It's simply like the same thing happened in COVID when you couldn't get your car parts. The cars were becoming more expensive for the same reason because the companies did not have the parts in the country to use. Like you wouldn't have, let's say, a car seat or your head unit a lot of times in COVID, which is why there was a whole surge in the second used car market and they were selling for great prices. Same logic here as well. If companies will hurt on their bottom line, let's say via tariffs, if the cars are coming from Mexico, it's going to hurt them domestically here. And we as consumers will have to either pay for it or the government will have to pay for that. Somebody's going to pay anyway for that, right? So that is how it would work. Also, interestingly, I think this is also a way for the government to push for manufacturing in the United States, which is also, you could say, a good way of doing it because they just got Hyundai to spend $30 million, right? So
in Louisiana.
Right? So they're trying to essentially make more manufacturing. Now, I also see it this way that it will hurt everyone in the short term, but it might also help everybody in the longer term. Now, this is something I teach my students in my class. If you go back to 2000s or 1990s, US was the biggest manufacturer in the world. And then we suddenly dropped in just 20 years from the top to, I think, seventh or sixth position now, right? That also is a problem for us. You do not want to be too dependent on a country because then if they do something like this tomorrow that we are doing, it will hurt our consumers at the same time. So I think this is like a key role or key way of the government also to see that how we can hurt a little bit on the shorter term, but maybe it might help us more in the long term. This is how I see it. But like I said, numbers is what will tell us how much it hurt us or how much it benefited us.
I had another question, and then Jonathan's going to get in here. So we've seen different administrations take varied approaches to tariffs. How do today's policies compare to historical trends?
So I believe for the last 7 years, the policy have stayed the same. So in 2018, when we had the Trump administration, whatever tariffs they kept were also kept by the Biden administration actually. so they were not touched at all, right? But now, because we are imposing more taxes, it will be interesting to see how that will change with future administrations, right? My understanding is if it brings in money, most administrations are going to keep those things the same way. If they don't bring money as we think, then it's going to hurt the industry. Now, if you go back a little in the past, usually, like I said, what first was when there was no income taxes. That was a way to bring revenue. Second was after Great Depression, they wanted to increase tariffs as well to save local manufacturing, right? That was another example. So it had worked out in the past on a smaller scale, but I'm not really sure the kind of amount we are going now, how that will impact supply chains and consumers at the same point as well. That'll be interesting to see. Now, the bigger question that we are trying to solve here is obviously jobs and the trade deficit that we have. That's what the government is trying to fulfill with the tariffs, but we would see how that will roll out in the future. Right?
I'm Johnathan Peña. I'm the editor-in-chief with the Mesquite. So my question is the retaliation and trade wars. Some argue that tariffs can lead to trade wars. Can you explain how that happens and the potential consequences for trade wars?
So it's simply, so if you are putting a tariff on something that you're importing, the other countries can do the same thing, right? So let's say if you're exporting agriculture, they can do the same thing that, hey, if you're going to put 25% tariff on us, we're going to do the same thing on you as well. So essentially, if whatever you are exporting now will be more expensive in their country and the consumers won't buy that, which will drop sales. Same thing. I think I was reading somewhere after in European World War II, after World War II happened, chicken was something that was exported a lot in Europe, especially in Germany, and I think it was costing 146 at time. Now, we were the biggest exporters of chicken to Germany, and I think the European Union saw that, hey, this is a lot of money that we're getting in. Let's impose taxes on that. So they imposed taxes, and the chicken became 225 that time, which became super expensive. So the exports for United States dropped by 50%. And then United States did the same thing. We were importing the Volkswagen cars and trucks. We did the same thing. We imposed taxes on that as well, and the sales dropped by 50% in the United States as well. So now you could buy a Volkswagen truck if you want, but you will have to pay more money. Same logic here as well. So you hurt something there, something's gonna hurt here as well at the same time. That's how retaliation works, right? They know. Another example is Canada. Alcohol is the biggest example. They took it out all of the shelf. They're not selling those alcohols there. Another example of that, because we are saying that we will impose taxes on Canada. Same logic there as well. Why this happens a lot? Some countries like China, what they would do is to avoid tariffs, they will bring in their stuff to Mexico, and then from Mexico they will ship that stuff to the United States. Essentially, as long as you did anything that is value added to that product in Mexico, it's off the tariffs. So I feel that's also something that the government is trying to do, where they know that this happens a lot, where companies will open plants in Mexico, bring in that stuff to Mexico, change it a little bit, and then try to send it to US without inquiries, basically evading tax and all that. So this is another way, I think, of restricting that action of other countries at the same time.
Next up, we have industry-specific effects. So are there particular industries in Texas or the United States that are especially impacted by tariffs, either positively or negatively?
I think let's talk about positives first. I think manufacturing, especially car manufacturing, with the investments and the semiconductor investments that we are seeing from TSMC, that's a 300 billion or 500 billion investment that we are going to see from Taiwan. That will push a lot of jobs for sure. When we talk about hurting, I would think anything that touches the customer every day is going to get hurt for the short term, for sure. Could be cars, clothes, anything that you get, anything from outside is going to get hurt, because all your clothes come from Vietnam, China, India, Taiwan, Philippines, and then semiconductors come from Taiwan, Israel. There are two more countries. A lot of aviation parts actually come out of United States as well. So it will be interesting to see how that will hurt the aviation industry as well at the same time, because aviation is one of the biggest industries that we have and is also part of US government. So if we do that, how is that gonna be hurt down the line? Be very interesting to see at the same
So, looking ahead, do you see changes in U.S. tariff policies on the horizon?
Yes, a lot, I would say.
What would be the factors that will shape their evolution?
I think a lot of it is gonna come with manufacturing and also just in political agendas as well in general. I think the key idea right now is to see how we can be a superpower ourselves. I think that's what a lot of countries have done in the past. India is one of them as well, where they pushed a lot of made in India in the last couple of years. So a lot of manufacturing did happen in India as well. iPhones were initially never built in India. Now majority of iPhones are actually built and manufactured in India. So the cost has gone down a lot. But it took a long number of years to do that. And I feel that's exactly what's gonna happen here as well. It's gonna hurt us a lot, I think, in short term, but might help us in longer term. I don't even think even if it doesn't help, at least it will make us self-reliant on some of the industries that we have in our country. The only thing I would want to see is if people actually want to do those jobs or not. So that's the bigger question I want to see.
Oh. What is the future of San Antonio? So on April 2nd, when the tariffs, what is the future for San Antonio on April 2nd when the tariffs are narrowed down and the future of reciprocal tariffs on neighboring Mexico and Canada will come to fruition?
I think it is too early to see right now because we never had this problem in the past. So I don't think we have an answer right now. Once it is implemented, is when we'll see how it actually affects the markets here. My only thing I can think of where it can hurt us a little bit is whatever comes from Mexico to Texas, like guacamole, avocados, those kind of things which you already saw got really expensive really quick. Those are some things I think can get hurt really quick that we import from Mexico a lot or depend on Mexico a lot. But I think in general, I do not see how it's gonna hurt us a lot, at least in the shorter term for now. We are pretty good with the jobs we have, and I don't think we share anything right away from Mexico at the same time as well. So I think it should be good for now, but like you've seen, tariffs change really quick in our current administration. So it'll be interesting to see how that quickly impacts what we do right now.
Yeah. Uh, I'm gonna go into another question. So with groceries, the tariffs on groceries, and how will this, we can see how it affects consumers right now. We seen it on the news. With inflation, definitely get an increase by then. So like in April, like in April.
Usually, inflation takes a little bit of time to happen. I would say at least 6 months for it to actually occur, which is why I'm saying it's a little early for us to see how it's gonna hit. But definitely, you can see quickly the drops in increases of fuel. Like one day it's like 295, and the other day it's like 240. So you can see that fluctuation. I think that's exactly what you will see, those fluctuations happening very often and stuff. Like one day you're gonna go something and it'll be like, oh, this is so expensive today. Some other day will be like, oh, this is super cheap today. So I think that's is what is gonna happen a lot, I think, in the next couple of months. But we'll see how this plans out. You never know, they might decrease it as well because they have also done that in the past. They said they're gonna do it, but then they never ended up doing it. So we'll see how it hurt us as consumers.
Okay, Dr. Garg, while you were explaining everything, I had a follow-up question. We're seeing the short-term increase of prices, reduce of product overall. What is a long-term effect mean in tariffs?
I I just feel the long term effect would be essentially either we are used to the prices that we are buying at, because let's be honest, most people are not going to stop buying what they're buying. But at the same time, um, a lot of people who especially do not make a lot of money are going to get hurt more, especially the people with lower middle classes. They will get hurt more because their salaries are not growing at the pace inflation is growing, and that will hurt them for sure.
I think that's everything we have for you this afternoon. But before we wrap up, is there anything else you think people should understand about tariffs and their role in the global economy?
I would definitely tell people to carefully observe what they look at. A lot of times, you will hear a lot of stuff, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's true. So I would say have your brain and eyes open to see essentially what you're reading. so that you can make a conscious decision yourself and what's happening around you as well. So that'll be all.
Visit mesquite-news.com for an in-depth breakdown on how Trump's recent executive orders will affect consumers in Texas and San Antonio.